All right, ready to dive in. Today we're tackling the Philadelphia experiment.
Ah, yes. The one with the vanishing ship, right?
Vanishing, reappearing, and maybe even a bit of accidental teleportation thrown in for good measure.
Now that's a story. And we're going to break it all down.
From the historical context to the wild claims, we'll cover it all, drawing on a fascinating Chinese podcast episode that really digs into the legend.
Sounds intriguing. You know, it's amazing how these stories transcend borders. A Chinese podcast delving into American wartime lore, who would have thought?
Exactly. It just shows how deeply these tales resonate. But before we get lost in the fog of speculation, let's anchor ourselves in the reality of the time.
Eh.
World War II, a global conflict with incredibly high stakes.
Right, and the U.S. Navy was facing a very real threat. Their warships were vulnerable, sitting ducks for enemy radar and those deadly magnetic mines.
You can imagine the pressure they were under, the need for some kind of edge, any advantage in the fight.
And that's where, allegedly, Einstein's unified field theory enters the picture.
Our source suggests that this theory, the quest for the ultimate equation of the universe, was somehow seen as a potential solution to the Navy's problems.
Now, I'll admit, I'm no Einstein, but the leap from unifying the forces of physics to making a battleship disappear seems, well, a bit far-fetched.
It's like thinking you can win a baking contest by just knowing the recipe but forgetting to actually bake the cake.
A recipe for disaster, perhaps, but not for invisibility.
Speaking of brilliant minds and potential disasters, we can't forget Nikola Tesla.
Oh, yes, the electrical genius himself. According to this podcast, he was involved early on, lending his expertise to the project, codenamed Rainbow Project.
A project shrouded in secrecy, aiming to develop some kind of electromagnetic defense system for ships.
Makes sense. Tesla's work with electromagnetism was groundbreaking. But of course, what's a good conspiracy theory without a dose of mystery?
And that's where the podcast throws in a twist. They claim Tesla had deep reservations about the experiment, even sabotaging it to prevent some unforeseen catastrophe.
Ah, the classic trope of the scientist who knows too much, tampering with forces beyond human comprehension.
It's a convenient way to explain any scientific inconsistencies in the story.
Huh.
Well, if Tesla himself was worried, there must be something to it, right?
Right. It adds that element of what if, the possibility that we're dealing with something truly beyond our understanding.
So Tesla allegedly exits stage left, leaving the Navy to grapple with his creations. And that's where the story takes a turn for the truly bizarre.
Because, as the legend goes, in 1943, the Navy decides to go all in with a full-scale experiment on the USS Eldridge, a destroyer docked at the Philadelphia Naval Yard.
The podcast paints a vivid picture. Green fog, swirling blue light, and then poof, the ship vanishes into thin air, leaving behind baffled onlookers and a whole lot of questions.
It's a scene straight out of a science fiction movie, full of visual spectacle and just enough ambiguity to fuel endless speculation.
But wait, there's more. It gets even weirder. The podcast claims that the Eldridge didn't just disappear, it reappeared over 200 miles away in Norfolk, Virginia.
Talk about a surprise. Imagine being a merchant seaman on a routine trip and suddenly a Navy destroyer materializes out of thin air right beside you.
Just another day at sea, Captain. Except for, that phantom warship.
I can only imagine the bewildered looks and the frantic radio calls.
But the story doesn't end there. The Eldridge supposedly zips right back to Philadelphia just as abruptly as it left. And that's when things take a dark turn.
Because according to the accounts, the ship returns in a horrific state. Fires, burn injuries, missing crew members, even rumors of sailors fused to the ship's metal.
It's like a blend of science fiction and horror. A cautionary tale about messing with forces beyond our grasp.
And it plays on our deepest fears, the anxiety about technology spiraling out of control, leaving chaos and suffering in its wake.
Yet, amidst this alleged disaster, the Navy supposedly sees a glimmer of potential. They stumbled upon teleportation, an accidental discovery with world-altering implications.
It's almost as if they were trying to unlock one door and accidentally opened a portal to another dimension.
But there's a catch, a major snag in their teleportation ambitions. The key ingredient, those Tesla coils, vanish after the first experiment. And without Tesla around to provide a replacement.
Well, their dreams of conquering the seas via instantaneous travel hit a brick wall.
It's like winning the lottery but losing the ticket before you can claim the prize.
A cosmic joke with potentially devastating consequences, but just when you think the story can't get any stranger, a new character enters the scene, adding another layer of intrigue.
Enter Morris K. Jessup, an astronomer with a fascination for UFOs, who receives a series of cryptic letters from a man named Carlos Allende.
Allende claims to have witnessed the Philadelphia experiment firsthand, providing vivid descriptions and technical jargon that would become central to the whole legend.
He wasn't just some random guy writing in. Allende insisted he was on that merchant ship in Norfolk, the one that encountered the Eldridge. His account, while filled with inconsistencies, would further fuel the flames of conspiracy for years to come.
It's as if the story itself is designed to be elusive, constantly shifting and morphing, just like that vanishing ship.
But before we get lost in the labyrinth of Allende's claims, we need to take a step back and consider another theory, one that's a bit more grounded but perhaps even more unsettling.
The theory of information warfare.
The idea that the Philadelphia experiment wasn't a genuine attempt at invisibility or teleportation, but rather a carefully orchestrated hoax by the U.S. government.
A grand illusion designed to mislead their enemies, protect their secrets, and maybe even sow a bit of fear and confusion.
It's a chilling thought, isn't it? The possibility that we've been deliberately misled, manipulated by forces working in the shadows.
It makes you question everything you thought you knew, blurring the lines between reality and carefully constructed fiction.
And just when you think we've covered all the bases, there's one more twist, one final layer to this already convoluted tale.
The Montauk Project.
Considered by many to be the sequel, or perhaps the spiritual successor, to the Philadelphia experiment.
It takes all the weirdness we've discussed so far, the invisibility, the teleportation, the government's secrecy, and cranks it up to a whole new level.
Time travel, mind control, interdimensional beings. It's like the writers of the Philadelphia experiment story said, "Hold my beer, watch this," and then proceeded to throw in everything but the kitchen sink.
It's almost as if the Montauk Project exists solely to make the Philadelphia experiment seem almost plausible by comparison.
So there you have it, a whirlwind tour through the bizarre world of the Philadelphia experiment. We've gone from invisible ships to teleportation, government cover-ups, to shadowy figures writing cryptic letters. What do you make of it all so far? Are we dealing with a genuine mystery, a case of mass delusion, or a government-sponsored mind game?
It's a question that's baffled researchers and conspiracy theorists for decades, and frankly, I'm not sure we'll have a definitive answer by the end of this deep dive.
But that's the beauty of it, isn't it? Sometimes the most intriguing stories are the ones that leave us with more questions than answers. So buckle up, because in part 2, we're going to delve into the science, or lack thereof, behind the Philadelphia experiment and explore the psychological factors that might explain why people are so drawn to these outlandish claims.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Philadelphia experiment. You know, last time we left off with the Montauk Project, the sequel that makes the original story seem almost, dare I say, normal.
Yeah, it's like they took the Philadelphia experiment, threw it in a blender with every sci-fi trope imaginable, and hit the puree button.
But before we spiral down that particular rabbit hole, I think it's time we took a more grounded approach.
Right, because as much as we love a good mystery, at some point we have to ask, does any of this actually hold water?
Exactly. So this episode, we're going to put on our skeptical hats and examine the scientific plausibility, or lack thereof, of the Philadelphia experiment.
Because, let's be honest, the idea of making a ship disappear using electromagnetic fields, it sounds more like a magic trick than a scientific breakthrough.
And that's the crux of it. The Philadelphia experiment, as it's often presented, it plays fast and loose with scientific concepts, taking a kernel of truth, like Einstein's unified field theory, and stretching it to absurd lengths.
Our Chinese podcast source seems to suggest that the experiment was based on the idea that if you could just control these fundamental forces, you could basically rewrite the rules of reality.
It's like saying you can turn lead into gold just by rearranging the atoms. In theory, maybe, but in practice.
Not so much. It's like taking a recipe for chocolate chip cookies and thinking you can make a pizza just by rearranging the ingredients.
A tempting thought, but ultimately you're just going to end up with a mess.
So if the science behind the Philadelphia experiment is so flimsy, why does this story continue to capture our imaginations? Why do people still believe it?
Well, I think there are a few factors at play here. First, there's the allure of the unknown. The human fascination with mysteries that defy easy explanation.
We love a good puzzle, don't we? We're always trying to connect the dots, even if those connections are based on, shall we say, creative interpretations of the evidence.
It's like those optical illusions where you see a rabbit or a duck, depending on how you look at it. Our brains are constantly trying to make sense of the world around us, even if that means filling in the blanks with our own assumptions.
Right, and the Philadelphia experiment, with its blend of real science, historical events, and fantastical claims, It's like a blank canvas for our imaginations to run wild.
And let's not forget the historical context. This story emerged during a time of heightened anxiety and uncertainty, World War II. People were living through a global conflict, witnessing horrific events, and bombarded with propaganda.
It was a time when rumors could spread like wildfire, and fear could easily morph into belief.
Imagine yourself back then, hearing whispers of a secret experiment gone wrong, a ship vanishing into thin air, sailors suffering strange side effects.
It's like a real-life horror movie unfolding before your eyes.
Exactly. And in those moments of fear and uncertainty, it's easy to latch on to any explanation, even if it defies logic or reason.
And let's not forget the role of the media, which even back then had a knack for sensationalizing stories. The Philadelphia experiment, with its blend of science fiction and wartime intrigue, it was tailor-made for headlines.
It's a story that practically writes itself. And once that narrative takes hold, it can be incredibly difficult to disentangle fact from fiction.
Especially when you have individuals like Carlos Allende, the author of those mysterious letters, adding fuel to the fire.
Right, Allende's claims, while often contradictory and lacking verifiable evidence, they added a whole new layer of intrigue to the story. He became a key figure in the Philadelphia experiment mythology.
It's almost as if his involvement was designed to make the story even more slippery, more difficult to pin down.
And his eventual recanting of his story, claiming it was all a hoax, well, that just added to the confusion.
Did he genuinely believe what he was saying initially? Was he pressured into retracting his claims? Or was he just messing with everyone from the start?
We may never know for sure, but I think that uncertainty is part of what makes this story so compelling. It's like a puzzle box with missing pieces.
And it invites us to fill in those gaps with our own interpretations and assumptions.
But even if we set aside the fantastical claims of invisibility and teleportation, the Philadelphia experiment raises some important questions about the nature of belief, the power of storytelling, and the role of critical thinking in a world saturated with information.
Welcome back to our deep dive finale, where we're wrapping up our exploration of the Philadelphia experiment.
You know, it's fascinating how a story from the 1940s, with all its bizarre twists and turns, continues to resonate today.
It's like a cultural echo that just won't fade away.
Exactly. And I think it speaks to the power of storytelling, our innate desire to make sense of the world, even when faced with the unexplainable.
Our Chinese podcast source mentioned how the Philadelphia experiment has popped up in all sorts of media, from movies to books to even video games.
It's become this cultural touchstone, this shorthand for anything involving secret government projects, advanced technology, and a healthy dose of paranoia.
It's like the story itself has become a kind of archetype, a blueprint for countless other narratives that explore similar themes.
And it's not hard to see why. We're naturally drawn to stories about the unknown, about the possibility that there's more to reality than meets the eye.
The idea that maybe, just maybe, the rules of physics aren't as rigid as we think, that there might be ways to bend them, to break them, to do the seemingly impossible.
And the Philadelphia experiment, with its blend of science fiction and conspiracy theory, it taps into those primal desires, those deep-seated anxieties about the nature of reality itself.
It's like a modern-day myth, a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the secrets that lurk in the shadows.
And even if we dismiss the fantastical elements, the teleportation, the invisibility, it still raises some important questions about the nature of truth, the reliability of information, and the power of those who control the narrative.
It's a reminder that we can't always take things at face value, that we need to be critical thinkers, to question what we're told, and to be wary of those who claim to have all the answers.
Because the truth, as we've seen with the Philadelphia experiment, can be a slippery thing, often obscured by layers of speculation, misinformation, and deliberate deception.
So as we conclude this deep dive, we encourage you to keep those questions coming, to dig deeper into the sources and to draw your own conclusions.
Because ultimately, the search for truth is an ongoing journey, one that requires curiosity, skepticism, and a willingness to embrace the unknown.
And who knows, maybe in the process, we'll uncover something even more fascinating, more thought-provoking than we ever imagined.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those minds open to the endless possibilities of the universe.
And always remember, the truth, like a certain elusive destroyer, might be lurking just around the corner.